I'm really excited about having Angie here this morning as our speaker. She and I connected about a year and a half ago, I want to say, latter part of 2020, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
The last 2 years kind of all blend together, so I have no idea what year anything happened, it feels like these days. But she's fantastic. We've met in person several times also, and we have a great discussion lined up for you. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and turn over to Angie. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself if you would, and let us know about about Navco and kind of what Navco does, and then your role out there as the head of global sales.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see. I know there's a few familiar faces. Joseph and I have stayed connected from the first one, and appreciate this group. What a great group. Again, during COVID, I think it was such a lifeline when we couldn't really talk to people. So it's nice to see everybody again. So I'm Angie Barnes. I am with a company called Navco. We are a security integrator, employee owned, and ESOP. We became that about 6 years ago. Are headquartered out of Fullerton, California. We do video access, alarms, you name it. We joke about it, Ken and I, that we do people like Whataburger, In-N-Out. That was our big discussion last time. Starbucks, Chase, Wells Fargo, all the way up to some of the luxury brands, FedEx, et cetera. So as our national headquarters is out here in Orange County. And I run a team that is based all over the country. We have offices in California, Texas, New York, and spattered throughout the central part of the country. We don't cover a lot in what I used to call the square states. Matt, you and I were talking about South Dakota. So we're not in South Dakota, but we should be. There's nothing wrong with South Dakota. So anyway, so that's what we do. I have a national team, and we are the security integrator. A lot of people don't realize. So we buy product from manufacturers, and then what we do is we kind of design the solution, purchase the equipment, and then we do the installation and the follow-up for a lot of our end user customers. So we're kind of the middleman versus Joseph. I think Joseph can share later, but Joseph's on the manufacturing side. So he would come and sell me a product, and I would say, oh, we love it. We're going to install it based on XYZ. So that's a little bit about the business side. And then personally, I am way too old. I'm joking, but I feel old some days. But I was in Texas for about 30 years. I moved out to California about 4.5 years ago. Live in San Clemente, California. My son graduated from Pepperdine, very excited, last May. Now is living the life in Manhattan, New York. I'm like, New York, California to Manhattan. Just got a job working as I have no idea what it is, but a hedge fund. I'm like, what is a hedge fund? Again, forgive me. I'm in sales. I'm like, hang on, you'll have to explain exactly what you do. I'm sure it's something very, very important that I don't know. So my main thing in the morning is I have 4 dogs, 2 golden retrievers and 2 golden doodles that I walk every day. And then I live life, and thankful for every day I've got and my health and everything we get to do and come to work. So that's me.
That's great. So you're that person that we all see out walking with several dogs all getting tangled up, trying to figure out how to navigate that.
Yeah, they're the ones that they go, are you a dog walker? And you go,
exactly.
No, they're all mine.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just a very passionate dog owner, right?
Ridiculous.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, that's
yes.
great. Well, good. So, well, thank you for the invitation to engage with questions and talking about your personal side too. That's great. We appreciate hearing that also. So we got a lot of different things that we can touch on. So I thought we would maybe start with, given that you have a pretty diverse sales team, both in terms of geography, but also in terms of age, right? You've got folks that are in their 20s just starting out. You've got folks that are a little bit older and those that are mid-career. Maybe you can talk about how you, as a leader of that whole team, how do you navigate that management, that leadership style in an industry that has been very old school traditionally, but now it's really very technology savvy, kind of tech forward, if you will. But how do you manage all those different personalities and needs across those generations?
Yeah, it's interesting for us. So the company started 50 years ago in the Northeast, primarily out of Boston area, Chelmsford. And we still have people that are here after 40 years, 42 years, technicians. And then we also have a good spattering of salespeople that have been with us for 25, 30 years. So we've got a lot of longevity. But it's funny you said that, because in the last, I would say, maybe 5 to 8 years, and I think some of it started when I came aboard, we really started building out what I would say a newer, younger sales team. And nothing wrong. Our older salespeople are phenomenal. They handle some of our largest accounts and have great relationships. But for the first time ever, we did an award ceremony last week in Denver. We do an annual awards, and we have 5 major awards we give out every year. And I remember every year I would come to the awards. I'd be like, oh, there's the same guy. There he goes. There they go. They won the award. All right, there they go. They've been here. They won the award. This year, for the first time, we had 4 out of the 5 award winners that had been with us less than 5 years. So we are starting to see this groundswell of, I would say, that our younger rookies / 3 to 4 years in really making some strides. So, which is really what will help us become, much more balanced. So it's changing. And again, it's about finding those people that are hungry for the business. So.
Do you find, as the manager of those folks, that you have to adjust your style, to lack of a better term? The folks that have been around a little bit longer, a little bit more traditional, perhaps more of a traditional hierarchical kind of a relationship. Whereas, the earlier or the younger generations, right, those that are millennials and the Gen Zs as well, they want full transparency. Right. And they want to talk to everybody at every level of the organization. And there's not any issue with, looking at the org chart first. How do you navigate that as a manager, as a leader, with those different mindsets?
Yeah, that's a great question. Very different mindsets. I think some of the newer, younger guys, again, we're in the technology business, so they love the technology. And so the newer technology, they embrace the technology. I would say some of the older generation is more relationship based. It's maybe more, we're built on the relationships. We always want to be in our role. We always say we want to be a trusted advisor, right? We want to be that person that really is leading you along a potential technology roadmap, versus the younger guys are more like, okay, I got the coolest thing I need to show you type of scenario. And which is great too. It's all how they connect with that person. I think it's a very different connection in managing it as well. The one thing I do find with some of my younger guys, they are prospecting fools. They are embracing, what's the one we use? I think Zoom Info Intent, LinkedIn Intent, some of these different LinkedIn mailing campaigns. They are working the system. And so there's a lot to be said for their energy level to prospect and find new business, versus our older guys. They will pick up the phone, but as far as, really actively going out there prospecting, not something I would think that they're quite as comfortable with, if that resonates what I'm saying. So. Yeah,
definitely. No, for sure. And what about and maybe this is switching back a little bit, but, during COVID, so many sales teams that were so reliant on, outside sales folks and doing that relationship building and, golfing, going to dinner, whatever it might be, all that face-to-face interaction that really helped to build that rapport and relationship, with customers. But when all that went away, right, in COVID, and there was no more ability to actually do those things, a lot of folks that I talk to say that some of their sales folks had a very hard time converting themselves from an outside sales mentality to more inside sales. And now you're selling through demos and online and just phone calls. And it's a very different kind of an approach, if you will. Have you seen a migration, from outside sales to inside sales in terms of how they approach that relationship building?
That's a good question. I don't, I would poll the group too. I think we've gotten better at inside sales because we've had to, right? Like I said, in some ways they've got more comfortable picking up the phone. The other thing that I think we touched on briefly too, Kim, when you and I were talking previously, is the fact that I had a phone call interview yesterday without Zoom. And I was like, I don't like it. Like, I don't like it. Like, I was like, I want to see these people.
Right.
And so I think the discussion of anytime you're doing any kind of sales approach virtually, you need to have the face, right?
Right.
And we all have bad hair days, me especially, where I'm like, I'm not turning on the camera. I'm just putting I'm putting my face up there. But I think you still can connect this way. Like I said, I think you're right. We salespeople think that we're all about the rapport and getting to know and the relationship. But I still think you can do that virtually. And I do think we've honed our skills even better that now that we are going back out in the world, I think we've got both. We did a really great class, training class, 2 weeks of, and it was an hour a day. And I took every one of them, and it was a virtual sales training on prospecting, and it was phenomenal. One of the best inside and prospecting programs I've done. It was called SOAR, SOAR, and it was just great. And so we did that kind of, I would say, about, mid-year last year, but it kept everybody motivated. So my goal was to always keep finding things during those times to keep people motivated about making those calls. Little contests, little different things, to try to get people excited about the virtual world, I should say. And again, we were very fortunate. We had a phenomenal year during COVID. I have no complaints on that side, if that answers the question.
That's great. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there definitely isn't a tried and true formula by any stretch. I mean, we all went through the same social experiment over the last 2+ years, right? So no one really had any training in this for sure. What about on the flip side? So you said you had a phenomenal record year last year during COVID. On the flip side, in terms of the buyer side, so did you see a change in expectation among your buyers? In other words, did they also want to be virtual? Did they want to find different ways to connect? And did it change or lengthen the buying process?
That's funny you said that, because we were talking a little bit about that in our breakout room. Certain parts of the country are very different, right? And so if you go to the South or Florida or even Texas, it's very still, people meet in person, very open, very comfortable with that. You go to New York or you go parts of California, of course. I was just in Chicago a couple of weeks where I was saying, I couldn't go out to dinner with a customer without having a vaccine card. So, it's different depending on what parts of the country you're in.
Right.
So I would say that depending on where their headquarters is going to be depending on whether they're willing to meet. We have our largest show. I don't know if you're going or not too, Joseph, in a couple of weeks for our industry from a manufacturer side is in Vegas, ISC West. And it looks like we're getting a good turnout. Looks like it's almost back to, I would say, semi-normal on the customers versus a year ago. It was maybe 25%, and when they did it. So
interesting.
Yeah. So customer engagement is getting better, but again, I think it's very, very location specific.
And did you see the sales cycle change at all? Have there been more decision makers and or a longer time to actually sign the contract, if you will, compared to pre-COVID?
I think we've employed a lot more DocuSign.
Right. We all have. Yeah, exactly.
Which is great. In some ways, like I said, I think it speeds it up. Our biggest issue from our company that I think we're now seeing is lagging 18 months later was not the sales side, but now we're running into the supply chain issues. For all of us that have driven along, especially where Joseph lives, you can see that long line of ships going into the port there in Long Beach and other areas. We have a record backlog right now of sales, but we are missing parts and things from other cameras and stuff that just are still behind. Our largest partner in Sweden, Access Communications, they had a record backlog of almost 6 to 12 months behind. So so that kind of thing. So the parts and stuff has been a challenge.
Yeah, for a lot of business out there. Yeah, I mean that's From what I'm hearing, the supply chain is starting to loosen up a little bit, a tiny bit. It certainly isn't getting worse, which is good, but it's going to take a while to really kind of work through that backlog for sure, without questions. Well,
Yeah.
so and to your comments, and Joseph had a question about addressing concerns from customers about supply chain issues. Do you find that customers are already aware of it and they kind of expect things to take longer, or do you have to spend a lot of time explaining to them what's going on with the delay?
Yeah, it's funny, you would think that they would be, but I don't know if they are. So we do have to do a lot of explaining, and we're having to pivot to other products. So, it's kind of like you better have an A and a B option for everything. I think in life, sometimes these days we have to have an A and a B option. So, but no, we're doing, trying to make sure that one, we're being very upfront with customers. We're talking about people, again, that trusted advisor as a salesperson we all want to be, to make sure that we really are being transparent on the challenges, et cetera. So I would say we're talking through it. We're doing A and B options from our largest to our smallest customers. And then what we're also saying is, hey, do you want us to install 50% of it? And then when the other 50% comes in, we'll do a return trip and install the rest. So we're trying to give as many options as we can. And I mean, I think that's the world today. Unfortunately, you have to live in. So.
Right, exactly. No, I agree. Yeah. And you have to adjust. Like you said, you have to have plan A and plan B and even plan C. On the recruiting side, we're seeing, the demand for talent is so strong out there. And like you said, you would think that, all of our clients, these CEOs that we work with, and heads of HR have read the same things that we have. And so they shouldn't be surprised by wage inflation, or how hyper competitive it is, or how their process needs to really be streamlined, or they're going to lose great candidates. But as you said, we find ourselves spending a lot more time educating our clients on what the landscape is like out there, because it's not like it was over the last couple of years. And it's also, as it's the joke that Americans have a very short memory. But a lot of us forget that in 2019, a lot of the trends that we're seeing right now, not all, but a lot of them, were already starting to take hold, right? It wasn't a big supply chain backlog, but things were already slowing down. All the issues with China, that was all happening. There was already a war for talent at that point. Compensation levels were already on the rise. Here we are now 2+ years later, and that those trends have just accelerated. Which has been interesting. So to that point, how do you keep your team educated on trends out there? Do you do weekly kind of meetings, if you will, and you update them with the latest trends, what's happening? Do you expect that they're going to be doing reading on their own, so they're well informed in front of their customers? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have different partners. We do usually monthly webinars on different products, different updates, different things like that. We'll have people come visit our offices, show us latest trends. We encourage the industry, mags. I read every day. There's a online called Chain Store Age that I read about what's going on in the world with the retailers, et cetera, the banking. So to keep up on that. But from a pure training standpoint, our manufacturers are constantly offering different trainings. Matter of fact, we do vendor contests, so manufacturer contests. Joseph, might be interesting to you is that, and this year, sometimes we do them at the end of the year. So we do a yearly one. But the one customer I was telling you that has this huge backlog of issues, we decided to do a quarterly contest, but we did it based on training and meetings and other things. So we pivoted from the product and we went to more of a training, opportunities to meet with them and partner meetings, et cetera. And then they get points based on that. And then each quarter, somebody will win. They get like a 2-day trip to any one of their experience centers, is what they call, which are in Boston, San Francisco, Miami, et cetera. But the encouragement was the training portion and how many points they get to do those kind of things. And also spending time with them as a partner. So, which is a little bit different than what we've done before. But again, we moved them to a shorter time span. So instead of focusing on a yearly, to keep people focused on a quarter, that gives people a little bit more motivation for that goal to the quarterly versus the yearly. So.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's always, and being an employee-owned company too, it's a little bit different dynamic at times where you don't have to worry about the rigor of having to report, numbers to the, to the street as a public company, but you do have obligation to your internal, stakeholders, if you will, right, to make sure everybody understands what's going on out there as well, and people are on the same page, which is very helpful. So a question from Joseph, from James, about anything that you're seeing as far as customers asking about manufacturing moving more green. Is that a request that you get where customers are asking you, hey, what do you guys do as a manufacturer to move to a more green footprint or a smaller footprint? Does that come up at all?
Yeah, it comes up from some of the oil companies. We work with Chevron and BP and those kind of guys. We do a lot of e-waste on electronics because a lot of times we go in and we'll take a site and they've got stuff that's been there, some of it maybe lordy 10 years, right? So we're pulling out all this stuff and then we're recycling it through an e-waste chain. We have certain green requirements for certain customers, and how in these days certain fiber, certain wire you're running, how you're running it, things like that. So I would say that's kind of where that's evolving. Security, for us, a lot of things is moving to the cloud. And so we're going away from actual physical, like, I don't know if any of you have been in a building where you have to have an access card, you wave it and you get in the door. Well, now a lot of it you can just have on your phone, right? You just literally boom, and it opens the door. So mobile credentials and things like that. So everything's becoming easier. From our standpoint, where you're having to use less physical things, but it's kind of like we said, where you pick up your phone and you use your face.
Right, exactly. We're curious, to that point, actually, kind of piggyback off of that, and also what you mentioned earlier about having a wide, spread of generations, of ages of people, right? Do you find that the younger generation has a harder time selling the more traditional security services? And then the opposite is true for folks that have been with the company for 20, 30 years, where they have a harder time selling the newer technology components, if you will, as well. Is it tough to kind of manage both of those different kind of sales processes?
Yeah, it's funny. We have a guy that works for me out here in California, and I used to joke a couple of years ago. I walked into his office and I picked up his phone and I pulled out the antenna.
Wow.
You remember those phones when we had the antennas?
Oh yeah.
And I went, Ron, I said, we're in the technology business. So you probably want to embrace the iPhone or a Android at some point, right?
Anything would be better than that. Yeah, right.
But he was my old school guy, right? He had to have the planner writing. He didn't want to put anything electronically. So you get some of that. But in general, I would say we're all pushing the same thing and towards the same goal, that if they don't embrace it, they probably will not be able to sell what they need to sell. So, so it's really important that they learn it. And again, for us, that we are making sure to bring the diverse group together in the training aspects and the webinars when we do that, to make sure that everybody is grasping some of the newer concepts out there.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, good. No, speaking of kind of COVID and trends that are still with us, so you guys are based in Fullerton, right? I believe you said, right? But you have a large presence in the South and Texas, as you talked about. So I'm curious about kind of the work from home trend, right? I'm sure that for a lot of your folks, they're working from home during COVID. Are you returning to the office? Is that an expectation? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. A lot of my salespeople that went remote are still remote. Now, I would say a lot of us salespeople, we were kind of the trendsetters early on doing home offices versus when you put admin staff and things like that. So I would say our essential work staff is in the office, but I would say our salespeople and our sales support people are remote. We've worked through programs on that, and it seems to be working successfully. I don't know about any of you guys, but again, I was one of those weird people that I actually came to the office the entire time. So I literally came in the office. Now we have a facility where I could come in, shut my door, come in and work. And then we still Zoomed, even though we were all in the building, sometimes we still Zoomed. but I needed that structure. Everybody has a different view of that structure. And so that's also with my certain salespeople. We give them the option to go into the office. They could have always gone into the office. We never prevented them from going into the office, unless, of course, there was a issue, or an outbreak or something that needed to be addressed. But a lot of them are still choosing to work from home. And I have not seen it be a challenge on the sales side yet. I think it depends on the social skills.
Right.
And I know, Ken, we've done this. We recently in a hiring, and I know you do these all the time, did an assessment on where our skill sets were. Unfortunately, my social ability index was way off the charts. So they decided I could stay in sales, but it also means I need people, right? So if I'm at home, I'm going to be talking to the walls versus other people are very comfortable with that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, back in 2020, we did a kind of a tongue-in-cheek article about, an introvert's guide to, working next to an extrovert and vice versa, especially when it comes to spouses or partners or whatever it might be, right? Because, people are not used to working side by side all day long. And everybody's got a different personality for sure. Yeah. And our side,
next to me, can you imagine?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. Talk about talking to the walls. Yeah, exactly. You go to Starbucks just to talk to somebody that might be walking by. Yeah. Which is crazy. Interesting. Okay. No, I appreciate that. Well, I think, what we're seeing on our side from as far as work from home goes, part of the driver, not the only driver, but one of the drivers behind this great, shuffle, resignation, whatever, media term you want to use about, the high turnover lately, is that companies that are expecting and requiring their teams to come back to the office full time, especially in jobs where you don't really have to be there. Right. If you're working in the warehouse or on the plant floor, manufacturing, I get that you got to be there. Right. But for the 38% of jobs that can be remote, companies that are requiring folks to come back full time, they're having a harder time retaining their talent.
Yeah.
No matter what the generation is, folks in their 20s and folks in their 50s and 60s, people say, I don't need to commute to the office every day. In my job, I can do from home. And they don't have to be working from home 5 days a week, but they want the flexibility. And the majority of companies that are offering that flexibility, those are the ones that are having an easier time retaining talent, but also attracting really strong new talent to their companies as well.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah.
It's been interesting. What about the interplay between sales and marketing? This is something that I've talked about for years, pre-COVID, during COVID, and now, of course, as well. Have you seen any change at all in terms of marketing and sales kind of interplay? We used to always joke at SMLA, pre-COVID, that sales and marketing would always kind of throw daggers back and forth at one another. Sales always blames marketing for giving them crappy leads. Marketing says, "Oh, we gave you great leads, but you just do nothing with them," right? So there was always that embedded back and forth, which we try to break those walls down. But when COVID hit and trade shows went away, so many companies that relied probably too much on leads coming from trade shows and those sponsorships, that all disappeared overnight. So we're seeing over the last couple of years, over the last 15 months especially, a lot more companies upgrading, enhancing, and adding to their marketing teams with a different kind of a skill set. But one of the key criteria for hiring those marketing folks is that it's got to be somebody who has good experience collaborating with and partnering with sales, not making it an adversarial relationship. So I'm curious about what you're seeing at NAFCO in terms of that interplay between sales and marketing.
Yeah, no, that's interesting the way you put it. So during COVID, one of the things we did and was very fortunate, we had some great virtual trade shows that really allowed us to network and to do that. And marketing did a really good job of getting us involved in those, sponsoring things. We had, again, we do a lot of retail. So there was a big grocery event that I had an opportunity to do intros to speakers, but we could gain visibility with our customers. So those kind of things. So marketing during COVID was really essential on giving us basically, and that's what we were talking about, avenues to reach those customers. That was good. I think our email campaigns kicked up. We worked together very well. We have a great marketing department. So I feel like it's a little bit hand in hand. I think it's probably because the VP of marketing is right down the hall. She and I are very in sync. on everything. And so I think if we're in sync, it pushes down through the sales team. But I think, again, it's just encouraging. We beefed up our website. We tried to do blogging. We did a lot of blogs on our website. Again, we got our salespeople to participate in those blogs, writing some of those blogs. So I think, again, it's the hand in hand things. But again, at the end of the day, marketing's role is to create visibility for us to be able to reach more customers. We also did local Google ads in the local markets. What do they call those? SCOs, I believe. Elaine might know that better than me. And I my marketing speak. But those have worked out well too, to reach some local markets for our salespeople that they went ahead and did during COVID. I think we just had to get more creative. Like you said, I was talking to my sales guy today in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he struggles a little bit with the prospecting side. And I was just telling him today, and I think I mentioned this in my intro when you and I talked previously, Ken, was that anytime I did a marketing, something that I wanted to reach somebody specifically, and Joseph's a master at this, by the way, if anybody needs tips, but I would do an overnight package or a 2-day package or something that I knew, nobody doesn't open a FedEx package. You're either worried it's the IRS or you're worried it's something important, right? So, but you always are opening an overnight package because it's got something of value in it. And so if you really have a high value target, you need to make sure that you're spending a little bit extra to get in front of these people. And again, our marketing team works with us to help do some of those things and collateral to help make that happen.
Interesting. I'm making a note here about, kind of what I call upselling, right? I don't know, like, for one of the things that we're doing, as a business, that we decided to go back over the last 3 years and look at all of our previous clients. We call them our elite clients, right? And we develop what we call our elite client partner program, where we want to find ways to create more stickiness, right? So how can we get our past clients to then engage us again, in our case, for future recruiting needs, and to remember us and to understand that we do more than just, one particular position. So we sent out baskets and, gifts to those folks too. And we actually got one very high level search out of that because of just that quick reminder, which is fantastic. On your side with Navco, is there opportunity for upsell when does somebody buy a smaller package, for lack of a better term, and then your sales folks engage those legacy clients to have them buy more? Or is it, you're focusing most of your time on prospecting for new clients?
That's a really great question. And the great thing is, yes, there's a ton of upselling in what we do. And it's very cyclical, again, because we talk about the technology again. Let me see how long this phone is going to last me. Even though it's probably perfectly okay in 2 years, I'm going to go, I think I need the one that does maybe the one other thing that it shouldn't, that you don't think it does. So for us, that's part of it. The other thing is we're in the technology business. Cloud, the nasty word right now is cyber, but a lot of things are in the cloud right now. We do a lot of remote service selling. So again, you may have something in your house or your system, but you need to know at all times it's working. That was very much a COVID symptom, is that when the world shut down and offices shut down, who's looking at what's going on in a lot of these buildings and what's happening and facilitating those things. And so we have a team that we've now building in Dallas that will do remote health monitoring, remote health. So you got a camera down. We can, a lot of times, a lot of this stuff can be done without anybody ever going to a facility. So that's a lot of an upsell for an existing client. And it's exactly what you talked about, Ken, being sticky. My first career was at Brinks, the armored trucks, right? And but at Brinks, if you just sold armored service, it was very much a commodity, right? It's like, oh, it's armored service, you pick up that. But if you sold cash processing along with picking up the money, and then you sold potential ATM replenishment, you sold all the other things, you realize that your customer, again, was very much tied into all the different features you had, and it was a much harder thing to move from there to there, right?
Right.
It's very similar, again, in our technology business. The more you sell them, the more you have invested with them, and the more, again, services. I would say services outside of the physical equipment is really where you become more valuable.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, a lot of customers out there, especially for the types of businesses that are represented on the call today, a lot of that is how do you create, thought leadership pieces? How do you do more than just sell, but how do you actually share and educate and inform your client base? And in so doing, position yourself as an expert, which then brings those clients back to you as well. Which is, it's tough if you're a small business, you don't have a dedicated marketing resource. But even without that, there are things that you can do, sharing articles, those kinds of things also. Actually, it was on my list of questions, and Joseph just asked the question too, with regard to video. So speaking of content development, like for example, you and I did a short little intro video a few weeks back, leading into, this discussion today. And we're finding that, we're getting more and more engagement from our network, our community, right? Customers and just contacts with video on the website, introductions, those kinds of things. Are you guys incorporating video at all into your marketing and or sales, strategy?
It's funny you said that. We don't do enough of it. We should. We have an annual performers conference we send our top producers on, and we've gone back and forth. So because of COVID, where we were going to go. So they finally landed on Hawaii. But with the invite went out the link to preview the entire property on YouTube, where somebody had literally shown you what the rooms look like, what the rest, and we were thinking, how many times have we gone? But the use of video, I was like, oh my gosh, that is fantastic. So when we're talking about video, and it was literally a video commercial by not necessarily someone from the hotel, but a tourist, and the way they did this. But the power of video is something that I think is underused. I know that we've been presented to do more on LinkedIn, to send a video message on LinkedIn. I have not done it, and I would like to do. We've tried a few of the video chats. I think it's just depending on your industry. Security, like I said, we're a little bit more locked down on certain things, but I think it depends on what industry you're in order to see that successful.
Yeah, it's very true. Yeah, and I agree. And that's the whole point about knowing your audience, right? Especially these days, the audience that you knew, the customer base that you knew pre-COVID, it's changed quite a bit now to 2 years later. So you really got to spend the time to research and understand, where they hang out, and obviously what kind of content they're looking for also.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. All right, good. Well, so let me ask you this, and back to your sales team and kind of the way that you're overseeing and leading and managing them. Do you see yourself having to adjust back to the way it was pre-COVID as we, come out of this, so to speak, and the number of cases continues to drop, and we all figure out how to live with this? Or do you feel like your management style today is different than what it was pre-COVID, and it's probably going to stay in this new form?
Yeah, that's another good question. I would say, again, I was a road warrior before COVID. Mm-hmm. What week it is? Where am I? Everybody see me at the airport. The agent that checks you in by name. You're in trouble, right? And I would say, since we've kind of lightened up, I'm about 50-50. Mm-hmm. So I would say, that would be a big change. Because I really like to. I'm one of those. I want to get in the car. I want to sit. I want to ride with you to appointments. If we don't sell anything, I want to know how you're doing. I want to hear how you're approaching it. I want to be that sideline coach. I always tell people, the salespeople, because we had a recent event where we lost one of our VP of sales. And what happened was they were a very successful salesperson at our company, very successful for many years, but they wanted to be a sales manager. So they're like, I can do this. I'm amazing. I can be a sales manager. Well, the problem was they took over trying to be a sales manager, and we're still trying to be the salesperson and kind of pushing and everything going through him and not allowing them to be the salesperson. It was kind of a unique thing. Long story short, it did not work out, right? I think they just realized that you should have never probably left sales, because all of us, and any of us who's been a sales manager, there's not a lot of glory, right? It's a servant leadership, and if you're doing a great job and your team's doing a great job is really where you're going to be reflected. But the main thing is letting them be the quarterback, right? We all want them to be the quarterback, and we're the sideline coach. And so to do that, traveling allowed me to kind of sit, like I said, to sit with them or go to meetings more, to be that voice in the room behind them if they had a presentation. And so I would say I'm doing less of that post-COVID or whatever we're at than before. But I think that I will ramp that back up as time allots, because I still think it's way underrated to be in person from a management, because there's nothing like being in person to really understand people and get that. We can do this here, and I can walk away, and be like, oh, she was really happy. She was really great, or she's got no issues, but then when you're in person, you may get a different feel from it.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this question. I know I just made, not to throw this on you all surprise, but is that going to change the skill set that you look for when you're hiring? Based on what you said a minute ago about, that face-to-face is still important, but perhaps not as important as what it was pre-COVID. Are you going to be looking for different skills or asking different questions when you're interviewing, potential hires?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say I probably will ask, how do you virtually manage your business versus in person? And do you feel like you can do both of those very well? I don't think we ever asked that question before, right?
Yeah.
Be like, if you've got a salesperson that's every time they get on Zoom, they're kicking people off, or they don't know how to turn on their camera, they don't do, at some point that's a confidence factor in front of a customer. So, I would say that that's something you do need to make sure that they can virtually manage as well as in person manage. So that's a good question, Ken, and something that I'm interviewing right now should be a question I add to my list.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Well, I know we're spending a lot of time with our clients also kind of just informing them of, regardless of what, level of experience they're trying to hire for, candidates are interviewing differently, right? The market is very strong right now. We typically track, what percentage of our placements we're looking at least one other offer at the same time as the offer from our client. And historically, it's around 70% typically, any given situation. Over the last 12 months or so, it's skyrocketed to about 96%. So companies need to understand that it's a two-way street when interviewing, and that they better be ready to answer questions and to be as transparent as possible with candidates, and also be very upfront and honest and say, this is how we operate. This is kind of our MO. This is our culture. Maybe it's a 60-hour a week, company, which that's okay, but just make sure you're clear about that when you're interviewing people. Otherwise, there's going to be a very, very quick misalignment. And we all know that people are much, much more willing to leave their job more quickly and not put up with that as compared to how they were, pre-COVID. So there's a lot of those changes happening in the interviewing process also.
Yeah, I'll tell you, and because you're the king of recruiting and interviewers. So my son, I was telling you about my son, he went to work for JP Morgan Chase in Manhattan. And, we're so excited for him, but he just recently got a job to work for the hedge fund I was telling you about. But during the interview process, I thought I've never heard this before. They actually called his high school basketball coach.
Yeah.
So my son was a big basketball kid, and they wanted to see what was his character, how did he play with the team? How did he handle anything under pressure? All these different things, but he talked to his basketball, and you saw all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, make sense when you hear that. But it was kind of like, okay, but you better make friends with your basketball coach in high school, by the way. Don't forget to do that.
Exactly, because you never know. Yeah.
Never know. Mine would have been my golf coach, by the way, who's still 80. I think he's 85 and lives somewhere near Palm Springs and is still kicking, but you would hope that he still gives you a good recommendation. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and I think that, the recommendation is important, and the transparency important, and just having a clear, honest conversation, because like it or not, companies need to realize that their employment brand, not what they're selling, but their employment brand is out there. It's in the marketplace, whether it's Glassdoor or Vault or any Google reviews. It's out there. And so they have to be very, very clear about kind of what they're all about, and the kind of understanding and owning up to the kind of employee that's going to do well with them also. It just takes that extra step.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. What suggest? I know that you recently, were thinking about joining a networking group, and you've got some other peer groups that you're also part of. Anything that you can share with us, if you will, about the power or the value of getting involved in a peer-to-peer, group like that?
Yeah, you gave me some great advice. So I was invited recently to join a group called Chief, which is all for I don't know, Janet, you may have ran into it too, and Nancy, for executive women. And I'll be honest with you, it had a pretty hefty price tag on it. So then I went back and you suggested look at the goals and what it does. The problem I had with it that it was mostly virtual. Again, I think at this point for me, I like the blend. I like both. And so I think my connection points were something that I would look at. I also belong to the Forbes Business Council, which for me during COVID was a lifesaver.
Yeah.
I found my passion for writing, which I did not even know that I had. I mean, besides the ones in college that I hated and had to turn in. So, but I loved it. I looked forward to just writing a little bit of a monthly sales article that I could contribute to the Forbes team. So that was really good. And then I belong to another group. I know you're familiar with, Ken, called Vistage. And I had kind of pulled out of that during COVID because again, it went remote, but I'm actually looking at going back to that again to create those peer connections. So, those are things, but I think because of my sociability factor, like I said, I think I have to have a blend of both to achieve what I want, to get out of it. I've done lunch club. I've done, you guys might be familiar with some of those. Lunch club was great during COVID as well. Met a lot of different unique people. But again, it was more about just how I stayed connected and also at the top of my game and learned things from other people, just like today with your team, understand more how to be better, how to sharpen that sword a little bit. So.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Yeah, I was talking in our breakout room earlier about the groups that I'm part of as well. And I'm certainly being more selective about the groups that I do get involved with and which events I go to. But, the nice thing is that I was part of so many pre-COVID, then I was able to really figure out, okay, so these are the ones that truly, brought value to my team, to me, as far as professional development and getting better at my craft. So groups like ACG, I'm still part of that group, very active there. San Diego Sport Innovators is great. And I try to go into each group with a different goal in mind. Is this just about pure networking and I hope to get some business out of it? Okay, great. I'll track the success based on that milestone or that KPI. Other times it's just pure professional development, like the Corporate Directors Forum, which and they have chapters all around the country, not just in San Diego, but up in Orange County and everywhere else also. And that's great. I always learn something from their very high level executive panel. A lot of board members that are there, corporations and CEOs. So that's a lot of professional development. So yeah, I go into each group, deciding what's the goal, what do I want to get out of this, and then give it at least a year and see if I was able to, attain that, those goals or reach those goals.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good reminder for all of us too. And I know my president's very great about embracing us doing those things. I think the one thing that he always asks is whatever you decide to do, make sure it's something you feel of value that you bring back and make the company better, right? I mean, we have our personal, but we also have our professional. So how does that help? How does that help NAVCO? How does that help the company? Are those skill sets that are going to translate to helping your team or helping your partners, et cetera? So, that's the other thing is can you transfer that to a company goal as well? So.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. All right. One last question here from Joseph also, which is a great one. And it kind of harkens back to our discussion a few minutes ago about company culture, right? And how you motivate your team, how do you retain your team as well? And he's talking about, kind of charity organizations. Does NAVCO do anything for their employees to encourage either taking a day to volunteer someplace or some kind of a matching program for any donations that the individual employee might give? Anything around that?
We have a couple things, and it's funny, we had to shut some of that down during COVID, right? Because you had mass groups, but we do reward them for a day to donate, and they get to pick, right, who the charity is, and then get a group of people together. We also have a program called Kazoo. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this Kazoo for our departments, and I say it's morely for our hourly and our admin teams where we can recognize them and give them different gift cards, or they are able to donate things, or we're able to donate towards a charity in recognition of them. But that's a forum. It's like an portal that we do as a company, and it works out. It works out really well, because we also had an opportunity on there. You could buy time with an executive to have lunch, things like that. So, but it's called Kazoo, and it's a great program, like I said, and you get points. And again, they are able to turn that into things to recognize them. So not necessarily all of that's charity, Joseph, but it also helps with, like I said, you can take some of those points and you can donate them to certain things, or like I said, donate them towards employees, et cetera, for recognition, which I like both those. But we do have a monthly program that we do on the volunteer side, but like I said, it did slow down during COVID and is starting to ramp back up because you just couldn't get everybody, willing to participate in certain events. So.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And you want to give that freedom out there for folks to kind of do what they feel passionate about. But it's also, we find it's also a good tool in terms of recruiting, right? If potential new employees know that you do support their, causes, whatever that's important to them, then it's a great way to attract talent also. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. So,
Elaine just put the link for Kazoo HR into the chat. So yeah, thank you.
It's great. It's great. Again, I have to say again, it's not, like I said, it's not exact, but it's really to push down to people and really to encourage your managers to interact with people to say, like we had our national meeting. So we were talking about that between sales and marketing, Ken. So that's great, where I could say from the sales side, hey, listen, thank you, marketing, for all your participation in the national sales meeting.
Right.
Here's recognizing, here's 200 points towards, whatever, but thank you for doing that. And then we have, our company has set up where we have the monitors at different places in all of our offices that shows the recognition on Kazoo, as well as our monthly KPI. So it switches between the two, but also you walk by and you say, oh, okay, Angie Barnes got a thank you for, bringing pizza, whatever it is, so, but that's a great forum.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I think that's one of the things that, we're seeing a lot of folks we talk to, they're looking to change jobs, and we ask them what the motivation is, and they'll say, I really don't feel like I've been acknowledged or even spoken to, by my boss or my boss's boss, right? There's just a lack of communication, a lack of engagement. And partly because I think during COVID, everybody was kind of just hunkering down and just trying to get through it. And there was nothing very positive to talk about, especially in 2020. And so that communication piece really went by the wayside, unfortunately. But the employers that haven't brought it back, that haven't been more transparent, or haven't taken the time to engage their employees, especially their top performers, unfortunately, they end up losing those top performers because there's just there's less connection, especially if they're now virtual also.
Well, and Ken, I know you and I've talked about this too. The one thing that I do with all my sales direct employees, and I encourage people too, is those weekly one-on-ones, those 30 minutes, just those catch-ups, and to have those clearly defined as what's the goals. And I know I walk away from every one of those. My last comment is there anything else I could do to help you? Anything else out there that you can, but that weekly 30 minutes that you set aside for just them, to focus on them. I always say and our president started with us, and then you just keep pushing them down, has been really valuable for us on that connection part. So.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I ask the question, and I try to focus on specific areas. How can I help you with blah blah blah, something that we've already discussed and identified as an area of development or what have you. So I agree. All right, good. Well, as we wrap things up here, any kind of parting words of advice or recommendations to the other leaders that are on the call today, as far as their teams go, or even with their customers?
Well, In-N-Out versus Whataburger. I was joking. We were doing that last time. So, by the way, anybody who was on the last call, Joseph, you remember this because Joseph sent me some Whataburger goodies. We now signed In-N-Out, so we actually In-N-Out is now a customer. So we have an equal representation. So no, I mean, I know. See, there you go, Mark. So no, just I would just say, from my standpoint, that spending time, like I said, those one-on-ones, the time with your teams, and being open to new ideas, listening. It's one of the things as managers and executives that we don't do enough of, is listening to their feedback and things, trying to create forums for them to give you that, staying on top of that, and being willing to change. Like I said, put away that phone with the antenna on, pull out an iPhone. And it's hard with the world right now. I think some of us have a mentality to kind of like you said, hunker down still a little bit because but go back to being that great in-person salesperson, even virtually. You can still, unfortunately, you can see I'm way animated. You can imagine me in person, I'd probably wear you out. But be who you are. Always be transparent in who you are, whether it's virtually or in person, and be thankful for the people that work for you every day, and make sure you tell them that. So
right, yeah. It's hard to follow that comment. I couldn't agree more. That's perfect. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Right, good. Well, thank you all for being here this morning, and thanks for the great questions and the discussion about Whataburger versus In-N-Out. I love that. we can have that on every call from now on. We should ask our speaker what their preference is.
We need to do a poll. We'll do a poll.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Maybe we'll choose two different fast food restaurants next time around. But thank you all for that. If you have any questions for Angie, I know she's very active on LinkedIn. I'm sure she'd be happy to connect with you and respond also to any specific questions that you might have about your team as well. So feel free to reach out. And then we'll see you all back again. Next month's going to be interesting. It's going to be a more of a kind of a controversial conversation about how to sell without an actual sales team. And so I'll be talking to Carter Housley about that. So it should be interesting. So we'll see you all back here in April. And otherwise, have a great rest of your week and a good end to the quarter.
Thanks, everybody.